In medieval London, only 20% of the population escaped peasant life, forming a powerful middle class that controlled entire cities through secretive guilds, complex monopolies, and royal connections. While peasants starved during famines, these guild families grew wealthier, lived decades longer, and even got away with robbery when connected to the king. Here's what life was really like as part of medieval England's urban middle class. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. All right, let's head back to 14th century London. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. Your eyes crack open to complete darkness. The first thing that hits you isn't sight, it's smell. Smoky wool, unwashed bodies, the sharp tang of urine from the chamber pot in the corner, and underneath it all, something exotic and unfamiliar. Cinnamon, perhaps? Cloves? You're waking up in the cramped attic of a merchant's house in London, 1345. You're Thomas, a 14-year-old apprentice to Master Edmund Gardner, a prosperous spice merchant of the Grocers' Guild. The attic is crowded with 5 other apprentices, all boys between 12 and 17, packed like spice barrels on straw pallets. The oldest, William, is already stirring. Moonlight cuts through the shuttered window just enough to see his outline as he reaches for his woolen tunic. "Get up, Thomas," William hisses. "Cook's fire needs stoking, and Master Edmund has inventory today." You groan and roll over. Not like your comfy modern bed, this straw pallet gives you no comfort, and the rough wool blanket scratches your skin. The cold hits immediately. London mornings in autumn are brutal. Your breath clouds in front of your face as you pull on your simple linen undertunic, followed by a brown woolen overtunic that reaches to your knees. "Do you think we'll get to help with the new pepper shipment?" you whisper to William, trying not to wake the others. "Not you," he scoffs. 2 years before you touch the good spices, Master doesn't let first years near anything worth more than a few pence." And he's right. The pepper arriving today is worth more than you'd earn in 10 years as a farmhand. A single sack could feed a village for months. In your head, you're doing the math. Your family gave everything they had, £2 sterling, just to secure this apprenticeship with Master Gardner. For 7 years, you'll work for no wages, just room, board and training. If you survive and learn the trade, you might become a journeyman, but becoming a master yourself, that's like dreaming of becoming royalty. The stairs creak as you descend from the attic, past the family's private bedchambers on the first floor, down to the ground level. The house is narrow but tall, wedged between similar structures on Soppers Lane, where many of London's spice merchants live and work. Unlike the thatched cottage you grew up in, this 3-story timber-framed townhouse has plastered walls and even glass in some of the windows, a luxury almost unimaginable in the countryside. "You're late," barks Cook, a stout woman with forearms like a blacksmith from years of kneading bread. Fire's nearly out. Edmund wants breakfast before prime. Prime. The morning prayer service. It's how everyone marks time. No clocks here, just church bells dividing your day. You hurriedly stoke the kitchen fire, adding small pieces of split oak that cost a fortune in the city. As the flames grow, you catch glimpses of the kitchen's contents. Hanging copper pots worth more than most peasants will see in a lifetime. Ceramic jugs from France, a carved wooden salt cellar. "Master wants the apprentices presentable today," Cook says, her hands already deep in dough. "Alderman Fraser is visiting the shop." An alderman. Your eyes widen. The city's elite governing officials, all chosen from guild membership. You've heard Master Edmund talk about wanting to be elected alderman himself someday, the first step toward becoming mayor. Is the shipment really coming today, you ask, trying to sound casual while stealing a crust of yesterday's bread. Cook gives you a knowing look. From the docks this morning. Pepper, cinnamon, ginger and cloves from places you can't even imagine. Now go fetch water before I box your ears. You grab 2 wooden buckets and head out the back door to the communal well shared by several houses on the lane. The sky is just beginning to lighten, turning the narrow street into a canyon of shadows. Unlike your village, where everyone sleeps until dawn, the city is already stirring. Apprentices like you fetching water, shop owners preparing for the day, servants emptying chamber pots into the gutters that run down the middle of the street. "Morning, Thomas," calls Eliza, the cooper's daughter, already waiting at the well with her own bucket. At 16, she's tall and confident, her father being a respected guild member himself. "Heard your master's getting the Venice shipment today. How do you know that?" you ask, surprised. She laughs. "Everyone knows everything on Sopper's Lane. My father says the grocers are getting richer by the day, not like the coopers who just make barrels for everyone else's goods." "Yeah, but without barrels, how would spices travel?" you say, trying to sound wise despite knowing almost nothing about either trade yet. The well water is cold enough to sting your hands as you fill the buckets, unlike in your village where water came from a stream and tasted sweet. City water has a metallic tang that took weeks to get used to. You've heard horror stories of London's water making people sick, which is why most people drink weak ale instead, even children. Struggling with the heavy buckets, you make your way back to the house. The city is coming alive now, and the narrow street is getting crowded. A cart piled high with firewood squeezes past, forcing you against a wall. A friar shuffles by, mumbling prayers. 2 men in fine wool tunics with fur trim, guild members, definitely, discuss business in hushed tones. The survival hierarchy is obvious even to your young eyes. Merchants in clean clothes walk confidently down the centre of the street. Craftsmen in practical garb move with purpose. Labourers stoop under heavy loads. And the truly poor, the crippled beggar huddled in a doorway, the hollow-eyed woman selling wilted vegetables from a small basket, they exist in the margins, invisible to the wealthy. Back at the house, the family is awakening. You hear Master Edmund's deep voice upstairs, giving instructions to his wife, Margaret. Their 2 children, Catherine, age 8, and little Henry, just 4, are being dressed by their nurse, Agnes. William and 2 other apprentices, Robert and John, are already in the kitchen, wolfing down their breakfast of coarse bread and ale. As the most junior apprentice, you eat last, which often means least. You eye the rapidly emptying bread basket with concern. "Where's Matthew?" you ask, referring to the 5th apprentice. "Sick again," says Robert through a mouthful of bread. "Coughing all night. Master says he might have to send him home if he doesn't improve." Sent home. The words send a chill through you that has nothing to do with the morning air. Being sent home means failure, a disgrace your family couldn't bear. More than that, it means returning to the grinding poverty of rural life, where failed harvests mean starvation. Here, even in the lowest position in a merchant's household, you eat every day. The bread might be day-old, but it's certain. "Thomas," Master Edmund's voice booms from above. "Are you deaf, boy? Bring water for washing." You grab the smaller basin and a clean cloth, rushing up the narrow stairs to the family's bedchamber. Unlike the apprentice's attic, this room is spacious and well furnished. A large bed with actual feathers dominates the space, draped with wool curtains for warmth and privacy. A chest containing the family's clothes stands against one wall, elaborately carved with leaf patterns. A small table holds a mirror, actual glass worth a fortune, and Margaret's few pieces of jewellery. Master Edmund is already dressed in a fine blue woolen tunic with a belt of tooled leather. At 40, he's a large man with a reddish beard just beginning to show grey. He stands by the window looking out at his domain. "Today is important, boy," he says without turning. "The alderman doesn't visit shops without reason. Everything must be perfect. You'll assist in the shop after we return from church." Your heart races. The shop. Usually, you're relegated to household chores, deliveries, or warehouse work. The shop on the ground floor of the house is where the actual business happens, where wealthy customers come to purchase their spices, where money changes hands. "Yes, master," you say, trying to contain your excitement. "And for God's sake, wash your face properly," Margaret adds, adjusting her headdress, a white linen wimple that covers her hair completely as befits a respectable merchant's wife. "You look like you've been sleeping in the coal bin." After helping the family prepare for the day, you join the household procession to St. Mary Le Bow Church for morning mass. The Gardner family walks ahead, Master Edmund and Mistress Margaret, followed by their children and Agnes. Behind them come the senior apprentices, with you at the rear. The church bells are ringing across London, calling the faithful to prayer. The street is now fully alive. Shopkeepers are setting up displays, apprentices are sweeping doorsteps, and craftsmen are opening their workshops. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the less pleasant odours of a city where sanitation is an afterthought. You step carefully to avoid the worst of the muck in the street. "You know what today really is?" William whispers as you walk. "Master's being considered for warden of the Grocers' Guild. That's why the alderman's coming." Your eyes widen. Warden is a position of real power. One of the officers who runs the guild, setting prices, controlling who can join, and wielding influence in city politics. "How do you know?" you ask. William taps his nose. 3 years as senior apprentice, you learn to listen at doors. Master's been campaigning for months. Dinners, gifts, promises. That pepper shipment. It's not just business, it's politics. At church, the social hierarchy is on full display. The merchant families sit near the front, while craftsmen fill the middle and the poor stand at the back. The priest delivers the Mass in Latin, words you don't understand but have memorized through repetition. The Gardner family follows along in a small prayer book. Another luxury, as books cost more than most people earn in years. Looking around, you notice something odd. Almost everyone here is connected to a guild. The wealthy merchants from the Great 12 companies, the mercers, grocers, drapers, fishmongers, goldsmiths, sit in the very front rows. Behind them are lesser guild members, the coopers, wax chandlers, bakers. Even the church's carved decorations were made by guild craftsmen. The guild system isn't just business, it's the backbone of the entire city. After Mass, you walk back to Soppers Lane with a growing sense of anticipation. Today, you'll see the shop, the heart of the business that might someday be your livelihood if you're extraordinarily lucky. The Gardner house has a different feel when you return. Servants are rushing about, preparing for important visitors. Cook has laid out small sweet cakes flavoured with the very spices Master Edmund sells, a display of wealth meant to impress the alderman. The shop itself, normally closed on Sunday, is being specially opened for this visit. "Thomas, come," calls William. "Help me prepare the shop." You follow him through the internal door that connects the household to the business space. The shop takes up the entire ground floor front of the house, with large shutters that open onto the street, creating a counter for serving customers. Inside, the walls are lined with shelves holding ceramic jars of various sizes, each carefully labelled. The air is thick with an intoxicating blend of aromas: sharp pepper, warm cinnamon, pungent cloves, earthy nutmeg. "Close your mouth before you catch flies," William laughs, seeing your expression. "First time in the Holy of Holies, eh?" You nod, speechless. This small room contains more wealth than you've ever seen. A single jar of these spices could buy a peasant's cottage outright. "Here," William hands you a broom. "Sweep while I dust the jars, then we'll set out the scales." The scales are kept in a locked chest, beautiful brass instruments with small weights shaped like acorns. These aren't just tools, they're symbols of the Grocers Guild itself, which has the right to test and verify weights and measures throughout London. False weights mean heavy fines, or worse, expulsion from the guild. "So this is where Master sells everything?" you ask, sweeping carefully around the central table where samples are displayed. William snorts. "Hardly. This is just for small sales and showing off to important people. The real business happens at the warehouses near the docks or at the grocer's hall. Master Edmund deals in barrels and sacks, not spoonfuls." A shadow darkens the doorway as Master Edmund enters, followed by a thin man in an expensive fur-lined cloak. This must be Alderman Fraser. "As you can see, Thomas," Master Edmund says loudly, gesturing toward you, "we train our apprentices thoroughly. Even the newest learns every aspect of the trade." You flush with embarrassment, realizing you're part of the display, proof that Master Edmund is contributing to the guild by training the next generation. "Good, good," says the alderman, barely glancing at you. "Now, Edmund, about this shipment. The guild will want their portion for the feast next month. 20 pounds of pepper at guild rates. Guild rates, the special prices members give each other, far below what ordinary customers pay. Just another way the guild protects its own." Of course, Master Edmund agrees quickly. "And I've secured those nutmegs you were asking about. Very rare, from islands so distant they don't appear on any map." The men move deeper into the shop, their voices dropping as they discuss business and politics, the two being inseparable in guild life. William nudges you. "See how it works? Master gets the alderman rare spices at special prices. Alderman supports Master for warden. Warden becomes eligible for higher office. Higher office means more wealth and connections. More connections mean better trade deals. And we just sweep the floors." You finish with a wry smile. "For now," William says, his voice suddenly serious, "but I'll be a journeyman next year. In 10 years I might have my own shop. In 20, who knows? That's the beauty of the guilds, Thomas. Unlike the countryside, here a man can rise." As you continue preparing the shop, you realise what William means. In your village, a peasant's son would always be a peasant, but here in London, within the guild system, there's a ladder, difficult to climb, but real. Master Edmund himself started as an apprentice, or so the household stories go. His son Henry will have an easier path, born into the guild, but even outsiders like you have a chance, however small. The day continues with a flurry of activity. The pepper shipment arrives, 4 large sacks carried by burly porters, each sack worth more than the house itself. You're allowed to help unload them into the storeroom under strict supervision. The tiny black peppercorns seem unremarkable, yet people will pay fortunes for them, a reminder of how strange this new world is. As evening approaches and the important visitors leave, the household settles into its normal rhythm. You're sent to help in the kitchen again, peeling vegetables for the family's dinner. Through the small window, you watch the light fade over London's jumbled rooftops. Despite the hard work and your lowly position, you feel something unfamiliar. Hope. In the countryside, tomorrow would be exactly like today, and next year the same as this one. But here, in this guild household, tomorrow might bring new knowledge, new connections, new possibilities. You glance down at your hands, already changing after just 3 months in the city. The farm calluses are fading, replaced by different marks. A small burn from the kitchen fire, a cut from unpacking goods, ink stains from your writing lessons. Master Edmund insists all his apprentices learn to read and calculate, skills nearly unheard of among peasants but essential for merchants. Thomas, stop daydreaming and finish those turnips. Cook's voice cuts through your thoughts. You smile and return to your task. Tonight you'll climb back to that cramped attic, lie down on that uncomfortable straw pallet and listen to the other apprentices snore. But unlike in the village where sleep brought only brief respite from endless toil, here your dreams have direction. 7 years of service stretches ahead. Difficult years certainly, but with the guild structure guiding your path. Outside, the church bells ring for vespers, and London prepares for night. In manor houses outside the city, lords and ladies dine off silver plates. In villages across England, peasants huddle in dark, smoky huts. But here, in the middle, the urban middle class created by the guilds, you found a foothold in a world of possibility. As you crawl into your bed that night, exhausted but satisfied, you think about the spices you helped unload. Each one travelled thousands of miles, passing through countless hands, crossing borders and oceans to reach London. Your journey from farm to city seems small by comparison, but it's just as transformative. Tomorrow brings another day of apprenticeship, of watching, learning, and working toward a future that, for the first time, seems limited only by ability and opportunity, not by the circumstances of your birth. Such is the gift of the guilds, the foundation of medieval England's urban middle class. Your eyelids grow heavy as the sounds of the city fade. Unlike your ancestors who lived and died within miles of their birthplace, you've stepped into a wider world, one built on trade, craft, and the collective power of people working together. The guild system isn't perfect, but it's created something remarkable, a path for ordinary people to build extraordinary lives. Morning light filters through the oiled parchment covering the window as Edmund Gardner opens his eyes. Unlike his apprentices, who sleep packed like salted fish in the attic, he wakes in a feather bed with linen sheets and woolen blankets. Beside him, his wife Margaret stirs, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. "Today's the day," Edmund says, more to himself than to Margaret. "Fraser will back me for warden if I handle this properly." Margaret's eyes remain closed, but she's awake. After 16 years of marriage, Edmund knows her rhythms better than the tides of the Thames. "Don't push too hard," she murmurs. "The Mercer faction already thinks you're ambitious." Edmund snorts as he swings his legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floor is cold against his bare feet. "Ambitious? God's bones, woman. What merchant worth his salt isn't ambitious?" "There's ambition and there's wisdom," Margaret says, finally opening her eyes. "Remember Hugh de Garton? All that coin and royal favour, and then he gets caught robbing his neighbour like a common thief." Edmund waves away her concerns as he reaches for his linen undershirt. "De Garton was careless. I'm careful. The king pardoned him," Margaret continues, sitting up. £200 stolen and not a day in prison. Tell me that's not worth being cautious about." "That's exactly my point," Edmund says, pulling on his best blue tunic, the one with actual indigo dye, not the cheap woad most Londoners use. "The guilds protect their own. De Garton is Mercer's guild, and they have the king's ear. We grocers need more influence like that." Edmund moves to the small basin of water that young Thomas brought up earlier. It's cold, of course. Hot water is a luxury saved for the weekly bath, not daily washing. He splashes his face, the shock helping to clear the fog of sleep. From below comes the sounds of the household awakening. The clatter of cook in the kitchen, the murmur of apprentices, the high voices of the children, the familiar symphony of prosperity. Edmund's fingers trace the small wooden crucifix hanging at his neck, his morning ritual. Business and faith are inseparable in his world. The guild itself began as a religious fraternity, the Brotherhood of St. Anthony, before becoming the Company of Grocers. Even now, a portion of guild fees goes to maintain the guild's chapel and pay for masses for deceased members. "Will you check the pepper yourself before Fraser arrives?" Margaret asks, now fully awake and reaching for her kirtle. "Of course," Edmund replies. "I need to calculate the values before he starts negotiating. You know how the aldermen always want preferential rates." Margaret gives him a knowing look. "Just don't undervalue it too much. We still need to make a profit." "Woman, I've been trading spices since before you could count to 10, Edmund says with mock offence. "I know how to balance a favour against a profit." "And I've been keeping your accounts since we married," she counters. "Sometimes your political ambitions blind you to simple arithmetic." He laughs and kisses her forehead. This is their familiar dance, his grand ambitions tempered by her practical caution. Together they've built this household from nothing but an apprenticeship and a small dowry. "I'm having Thomas help in the shop today," Edmund says, changing the subject. Margaret pauses in pinning her wimple. "The new boy? Is he ready?" "No, but he needs to see how it's done. William says he's quick with figures, and he has a good manner, respectful but not timid." "Unlike that last boy you took on," Margaret says with a grimace. "What was his name? The one who kept knocking things over?" "Peter," Edmund says, wincing at the memory. "Cost me £3 in broken merchandise before I sent him back to his father." "At least Thomas comes from farm stock," Margaret says. "They know the value of work." Edmund nods, thinking of the thin, wide-eyed boy who arrived 3 months ago, the son of a franklin, a free landowner, not a serf, with enough ambition to send his son to London rather than keep him for farm labour. The apprenticeship fee of £2 had been significant for them, representing perhaps years of careful saving. For Edmund, taking apprentices serves multiple purposes. They provide labour, of course, cheaper than hiring servants, but more importantly, they're an investment in the guild's future and a fulfilment of his obligations as a guild member. Every master is expected to train the next generation, and occasionally, like William, an apprentice shows real promise, the potential to become not just a journeyman, but eventually a master himself. "Speaking of costs," Edmund says, buckling his belt, "we need to discuss the feast for the Guild Brothers next month. If I'm to be nominated for warden, we should host it here." Margaret sighs. "Another feast? Edmund, we just paid for new shutters on the shop, and Catherine needs new shoes." "This is how it works," Edmund insists. "You want Catherine to marry well, don't you? A match with a draper's son, perhaps? Or even a mercer? That happens through connections, and connections happen over feasts and wine." Before Margaret can respond, there's a gentle knock at the door. Agnes, their servant, calls softly, "Master, the children are ready for breakfast." "We'll continue this later," Edmund says, giving Margaret a look that brooks no argument. "We have mass first, then business." Downstairs, the household has assembled for breakfast. The two children, Catherine and Henry, are already dressed in their Sunday clothes. The apprentices stand respectfully as Edmund enters, though he notices young Matthew is missing. "Where's the sick boy?" Edmund asks William. "Still abed, master," William replies. His cough worsened in the night. Edmund frowns. Illness is always a concern in a crowded city like London, but particularly in a merchant's household. If Matthew has something catching, it could spread through the apprentices and disrupt business for weeks. "Agnes," Edmund calls to the servant, "check on him after breakfast. If he's no better, we'll send for the physician." Agnes nods, though they both know what that means. Physicians are expensive, and while Edmund can afford one, it's an expense he'd rather avoid for a mere apprentice. But the guild also watches how masters treat their apprentices. Neglect would reflect poorly on him. Breakfast is simple but hearty. Fresh bread, a bit of cheese, and small beer, weak ale, which everyone drinks, even the children. Clean water is too risky in London, where the wells are often contaminated. Edmund eats quickly, his mind already on the day's business. After the meal, he leads the household to St. Mary le Bow Church for Sunday Mass. As a prominent merchant, Edmund has a designated pew near the front, a small luxury that costs him an extra donation each year, but reinforces his status in the community. As they walk through the narrow streets, Edmund notes which shops are preparing to open after church and which remain shuttered. Sunday trading is officially discouraged but widely practiced, especially by those selling food or drink. The Grocers Guild, dealing in non-perishable goods, generally observes the Sabbath restrictions, though many transactions are simply conducted quietly at home. The church is already filling when they arrive. Edmund nods to familiar faces, fellow merchants, craftsmen, their families and apprentices, London's middle class, created and sustained by the guild system. He spots Richard Whitington, a mercer who's rapidly rising in influence, and makes a mental note to speak with him later. The mercers and grocers are natural allies in many city matters, despite their occasional rivalries. After Mass, Edmund walks back to Sopper's Lane with purpose in his step. Unlike the apprentices, who see Sunday as their one day of slightly reduced labour, for Edmund it's often filled with the most important business, the meetings that can't happen during the regular trading week. "Thomas," he calls as they approach the house, "you'll attend me in the shop today." The boy's face lights up, and Edmund suppresses a smile. The eagerness of apprentices is always amusing. They think witnessing a transaction is a great privilege, not realizing how many tedious hours of negotiation it might entail. As soon as they enter the house, Edmund moves quickly through the domestic spaces to the shop at the front. Unlike the cluttered, crowded shops of lesser merchants, Edmund's establishment is designed to impress. The spices are stored in matching ceramic jars with painted labels. The counter is polished oak. Brass scales gleam on a side table, their accuracy certified by the guild's own inspectors. "William, open the shutters halfway," Edmund instructs. "Enough light to see, but not so open as to look like we're trading on the Sabbath." William nods and adjusts the large wooden shutters that form a counter when fully opened. Thomas stands awkwardly in the centre of the shop, clearly uncertain what to do. "You, boy," Edmund says sharply, "come here." Thomas hurries over, nearly tripping on the edge of a rug from Damascus, another display of Edmund's far-reaching trade connections. "Today you'll learn the first rule of the spice trade," Edmund says. "Show me your hands." Thomas extends his hands, palms up. They're no longer the rough, calloused hands of a farm boy, but they're still marked with small cuts and stains from his work. "Clean?" Edmund asks. "Yes, master," Thomas says hesitantly. Edmund raises an eyebrow. "Are they? Let me see you handle this." He reaches into a small jar and removes a single cinnamon stick, handing it to Thomas. The boy takes it carefully. "Now smell your fingers," Edmund instructs. Thomas does so, his eyes widening. "They smell like the cinnamon." "Exactly," Edmund says. "And if your hands are dirty, that dirt transfers to the spice. If the spice is contaminated, its value decreases. In the Grocers Guild, clean hands aren't just about hygiene, they're about protecting our investment." Thomas nods seriously, and Edmund continues. "The second rule, accurate weight. The guild's reputation depends on honest measure. Short a customer and word spreads. Give too much and you lose profit. Either way, you damage the guild." A knock at the door interrupts the lesson. William opens it to reveal John Fraser, the alderman, dressed in his finest clothing with a heavy gold chain of office around his neck. "Edmund," Fraser says warmly, though his eyes are calculating, "a fine morning for business." "Indeed, John," Edmund replies, gesturing for Thomas to step back. "You honour my humble shop." Fraser snorts at the word humble. They both know Edmund's operation is among the most profitable in the Grocers Guild. "Let's not play games, Gardner. I've come about the pepper and the warden position." Edmund appreciates the directness. While guild politics often involve elaborate courtesy among the inner circle, plain speaking prevails. "Of course. William, bring the sample chest. Thomas, return to the kitchen until called." As Thomas leaves, William appears with a small wooden chest, which he places on the counter before discreetly withdrawing to the storeroom, close enough to be called if needed, far enough to give the appearance of privacy. Edmund unlocks the chest with a key from his belt. Inside are small linen bags, each containing a sample of the spices from yesterday's shipment. He selects one and loosens the string, allowing Fraser to see the black peppercorns inside. "Finest Malabar pepper," Edmund says. "Arrived yesterday on the Swan. 3 months at sea, but perfectly preserved." Fraser takes a few corns, crushing one between his fingers and sniffing it. "Good quality," he admits. "How much arrived?" "Oh, 4 sacks, Edmund says, deliberately vague about the exact weight. "Enough to meet the guild's needs for the feast next month, with some remaining for discretionary allocation." Fraser understands the implication. Beyond the official guild purchase, there will be private sales to influential members at special rates, a common practice that blurs the line between business and politics. "And the price?" Fraser asks, though they both know this is where the real negotiation begins. Edmund names a figure slightly above the market rate, as expected. Fraser counters with an offer well below it. Also, as expected, they settle, after the proper amount of haggling, on a price that's actually exactly what Edmund had calculated as fair before Fraser arrived. The dance of negotiation matters as much as the outcome. "Now," Edmund says, securing the sample bags, "about the warden nomination." Fraser's expression becomes more guarded. "There are several worthy candidates." "Of course," Edmund agrees smoothly. "The guild is blessed with capable men, but few have my experience with Eastern trade routes, and fewer still have managed to maintain good relations with both the Venetian and Genoese merchants." This is true, and they both know it. Edmund has cultivated contacts among the Italian traders who dominate the Mediterranean spice routes, playing the rivals against each other to secure better prices. "Warden is not merely about trade connections," Fraser says carefully. "It's about managing the guild's internal affairs, the training of apprentices, the maintenance of standards, the adjudication of disputes." Edmund nods. "I've trained 12 apprentices over 15 years. 6 have become journeymen. 2 are now masters with their own shops. My standards are well known in the guild, and as for disputes," he smiles thinly, "I believe my reputation for fairness speaks for itself." Fraser considers this. "There's also the matter of your ambitions, Edmund. Some feel you're rising too quickly." Ambition serves the guild when properly directed, Edmund counters. The drapers and mercers grow stronger each year. The grocers must match them or be left behind. This touches on a sensitive point. The Great 12 livery companies, the most powerful guilds in London, constantly jockey for position. Currently, the grocers rank second only to the mercers in prestige, but their position is not secure. You make a compelling case, Fraser admits. But there's one more thing. The guild needs a new trade hall. The old one is too small for our growing membership. A warden would be expected to contribute generously to such a project. And there it is. The real price of advancement. Not just the pepper at a favourable rate, but a substantial donation to the guild's building fund. Edmund had anticipated this and already discussed it with Margaret, though he'd not mentioned the likely amount. "I would be honoured to support such a worthy cause," Edmund says carefully. "Perhaps £20 would be an appropriate contribution." Fraser's eyebrows rise slightly. £20 is a substantial sum, more than many small merchants earn in a year, but for a prosperous spice trader like Edmund, it's significant without being crippling. Very appropriate, Fraser agrees. Combined with your generous pricing on the pepper, I believe that would address any concerns about your suitability for the position. The negotiation concluded, they shake hands. Fraser departs with a small sample of the pepper to show the other guild officers and a promise to speak in Edmund's favour at the next guild meeting. As the door closes behind the alderman, Edmund allows himself a small smile of satisfaction. The path to warden is now clear, and from warden to the higher echelons of guild leadership, perhaps eventually even to alderman himself, and from there, who knows? The Mayor of London is always chosen from among the guild elite. "William," Edmund calls, "fetch Thomas back. His education should continue." While waiting, Edmund unlocks a small chest beneath the counter and updates his personal account book, a bound volume of parchment sheets where he records his most important transactions. Unlike most merchants who rely on tally sticks or memory for routine business, Edmund maintains detailed written records of everything. It's a skill he learned from an Italian trader years ago and one he considers essential to his success. The door opens and Thomas returns looking nervous. "Come, boy," Edmund says, gesturing him closer. "You've missed the negotiation, but there's still much to learn. Tell me, what do you know about how spices reach London?" Thomas hesitates. "They come on ships from far away?" Edmund suppresses a sigh. "Yes, but that's like saying babies come from women. Technically correct, but missing all the interesting details." William, sorting spice jars nearby, chokes back a laugh. "The pepper you helped unload yesterday," Edmund continues, "began its journey in the Malabar coast of India. Farmers there grow the pepper vines, harvest the corns, and dry them in the sun. Local merchants buy from the farmers and sell to Arab traders who carry the pepper across the Indian Ocean to ports in the Red Sea." Thomas's eyes widen as Edmund traces the journey on the countertop as if it were a map. From there, it travels by camel caravan to Alexandria in Egypt. Venetian or Genoese merchants buy it there and ship it across the Mediterranean to Italy. Then it crosses the Alps on muleback to markets in France or the Low Countries. Finally, it reaches London on ships sailing into the Thames. "That's incredible," Thomas says. "How long does all that take?" "Years, sometimes," Edmund says. "The pepper you unloaded might have been harvested 3 years ago, and at each step someone takes a profit. By the time it reaches my shop, a sack of pepper worth perhaps 5 shillings at the source costs £5 or more." "So much," Thomas exclaims, clearly trying to calculate how many days' labour that represents for an ordinary worker. "Indeed," Edmund says, "and that's why the spice trade requires guilds. No individual merchant could manage such complex trade routes alone. We need collective agreements, shared risks, pooled knowledge." He opens a different jar and removes a small piece of nutmeg, holding it up to the light. This is even more valuable than pepper. It comes from islands so remote that few Europeans know their location. The Arabs and Venetians protect their trade secrets jealously, but through the guild I can access these rare goods. Thomas stares at the nutmeg with new appreciation. Is that why spices cost so much, because they're so hard to get? Partly, Edmund says, but it's also because they last. Wheat rots, ale sours, cloth moths eat, but properly stored spices keep their value for years. In uncertain times, they're as good as gold. Better sometimes because everyone needs to eat, but not everyone needs gold coins. He returns the nutmeg to its jar. The guild ensures quality and regulates prices. Without us, the market would be chaos. Adulterated goods, wildly fluctuating prices, unreliable supplies. The customer pays more, yes, but receives an assured quality and steady availability. Edmund watches Thomas absorbing this information. The boy is sharp, which is promising. A good merchant needs more than just honesty and hard work. He needs intelligence and adaptability. There's one more thing you should understand, Edmund says, lowering his voice, although there's no one else in the shop. The guild isn't just about trade, it's about survival. Thomas looks puzzled, and Edmund continues. Think about your village. When crops fail, what happens? People starve, Thomas says simply. Last winter, 3 families in our parish died when the rains flooded the fields. Edmund nods grimly. Exactly, but when was the last time you heard of a guild member starving? Even in the Great Famine 30 years ago, when peasants were eating bark and roots, London's guild members survived. We help each other. If one merchant fails, others support him. If someone dies, the guild cares for his widow and children. He gestures to the street outside. That's the true power of the middle class, as some call us. Not just wealth, but security, protection from the cruel whims of nature and fortune that kill so many of the poor. A church bell rings in the distance, marking the hour before noon. Edmund glances at the door, expecting Margaret to call them for the midday meal soon. Enough philosophy, he says briskly. Before dinner, you'll learn something practical. William, show Thomas how to properly weigh cloves and explain why we have different weights for buying and selling. William grins. Yes, master. As Edmund turns to go check on the household affairs, he adds casually, and Thomas, if you're ever fortunate enough to become a shop owner yourself, remember today. The guild protects its own, but it also demands much. Every privilege comes with obligation. Thomas nods solemnly, and Edmund sees in the boy's eyes the same hunger he once felt, the desire to rise, to secure not just wealth, but the safety it brings. The guild system isn't perfect, but it offers something precious, the chance for ordinary men to build extraordinary lives, protected by the collective power of their brotherhood. Walking through to the living quarters, Edmund reflects on how far he's come from his own apprenticeship. 25 years ago, he too was a wide-eyed boy learning to handle spices with clean hands. Now he stands on the cusp of becoming a warden of the Grocers Guild, with all the power and responsibility that entails. The smell of the midday meal, a hearty pottage of vegetables and a small amount of salted beef greets him as he enters the hall. Margaret is already there, supervising the table setting. Their eyes meet, and he gives a small nod. She understands immediately. The meeting with Fraser went well. The investment in pepper and coin will yield the position they've worked toward for years. In the comfortable home of a successful London merchant with the security of guild membership around him and the prospect of greater influence ahead, Edmund Gardner feels a deep satisfaction. The chaotic uncertainties that plague the lives of peasants and labourers seem distant here. Through skill, ambition, and the powerful structure of the guild system, he has carved out a place in the world where his family can thrive, the very essence of medieval England's urban middle class. Margaret Gardner watches her husband enter the hall with that familiar look of satisfaction on his face. After 16 years of marriage, she can read Edmund like one of his account books. The meeting with Alderman Fraser went well, which means they'll soon be hosting feasts for guild members. Expensive, elaborate affairs that will strain their resources but potentially yield greater rewards. Agnes, make sure the children wash properly before eating, Margaret says to the servant before turning her attention to the main table. The midday meal is modest by their usual standards, a vegetable pottage with a small amount of salted beef, fresh bread and ale. Margaret has deliberately kept it simple today, knowing that the afternoon will bring the week's major cooking tasks. Sunday is when she plans the household's meals for the coming days, tallies the pantry stores and makes lists of what must be purchased at tomorrow's market. Unlike the wives of nobility who merely oversee servants, Margaret is deeply involved in running her household. The Gardner family can afford 3 servants: cook Agnes, who helps with the children, and Berta, who assists with laundry and cleaning, but the bulk of management falls to Margaret herself. "Will we be hosting the guild officers this month?" she asks Edmund quietly as they take their places at the head of the table. "Yes," he confirms. "Fraser as good as promised me the warden nomination. We'll need to impress the voting members." Margaret nods, mentally calculating costs. A feast for 20 guild brothers would require at least 3 types of meat, fish, elaborate sauces, and plenty of wine. Not to mention new rushlights, perhaps hiring musicians, and possibly new table linens. Edmund's political ambitions are expensive. The family and household staff gather around the table. Edmund and Margaret at the head, the children to their right, the senior apprentices to their left, and the servants and junior apprentices at the far end. Edmund says the blessing, and they begin to eat. "Thomas joined me in the shop today," Edmund tells Margaret as he tears a piece of bread. The boy shows promise. "Does he?" Margaret asks, watching the skinny apprentice at the far end of the table. William speaks well of him too, says he's quick with figures, quicker than most. He grasped the pepper trade route explanation immediately. Margaret smiles. "Well, that's more than can be said for some of the merchants' sons I've met. Born to the guild and still can't tell nutmeg from mace." Their daughter Catherine pipes up. "Father, will Thomas work in the shop more now?" "Perhaps," Edmund says. "Why do you ask?" "He told me about the farm where he grew up," the 8-year-old says. "They had cows and chickens. I've never seen a real cow. And you likely won't in London," Margaret says, "unless you count the ones being driven to Smithfield Market for slaughter." "Can I go to the market with you tomorrow?" Catherine asks eagerly. Margaret exchanges a glance with Edmund. Their daughter is reaching the age where she needs to learn household management, but Cheapside Market can be rough, especially on busy days. "You may come," Margaret decides, "but you'll stay close to me, and Agnes will accompany us." Catherine beams, while her younger brother Henry looks put out at being excluded. At 4, he's still too young for the bustling market. As the meal continues, Margaret observes the household dynamics with a practiced eye. The newest apprentice, Thomas, eats quickly but neatly. Good manners for a farm boy. Matthew is absent, still sick in bed. The senior apprentices discuss yesterday's shipment in hushed tones, while Cook quietly informs Berta which breads to bake tomorrow. This is Margaret's domain, the smooth operation of a merchant household that serves as both family home and business headquarters. Unlike peasant women who work alongside their husbands in the fields, or noble women who primarily manage social affairs, women of the merchant class occupy a unique position, deeply involved in business matters while maintaining traditional domestic roles. After the meal, Edmund retreats to his counting room, a small chamber off the hall where he keeps his accounts and conducts private business. The apprentices are given their Sunday tasks, mending clothes, studying their letters, or helping with household maintenance. The children are sent with Agnes to practice their reading. Now begins Margaret's busiest time of day. First, she checks on Matthew, the sick apprentice. The boy is feverish, his cough dry and painful. "How long has it been this bad?" she asks, placing a cool cloth on his forehead. "Since last night, mistress," he rasps. "I tried not to wake the others." Margaret frowns. "Agnes will bring you some honey and hyssop for that cough. If you're no better by morning, we'll send for the physician." In truth, she's worried. Illness spreads quickly through a household, and with the possibility of hosting guild officers soon, they can't afford an outbreak of disease. But the boy also represents a significant investment, his apprenticeship fee and 3 years of training already given. Masters are judged partly by how well they care for their apprentices. Next, Margaret goes to the kitchen where Cook is already preparing bread dough for tomorrow's baking. "We need to discuss the coming week," Margaret says, sitting at the small table in the corner. From her sleeve she pulls a small parchment notebook, another Italian innovation Edmund brought back from his travels. Cook wipes her hands on her apron. "What's the master planning now?" "Guild officers' feast, likely within the fortnight," Margaret says. 20 men, at least." Cook groans. "Not another one. We just did the Michaelmas feast last month." "This is different," Margaret explains. "Edmund is being nominated for warden. It could mean a great deal for the family, and more work for the rest of us," Cook grumbles, but without real anger. The household staff takes pride in their master's rise, knowing their own status increases alongside his. Together, they plan the week's ordinary meals and begin organising the potential feast. Special occasions require careful planning. Certain foods must be ordered days in advance, spices measured out from Edmund's precious store, extra help hired for the day itself. "We'll need at least 3 fish dishes for the feast," Margaret says. "It's important to show we observe proper fasting days, but also that we can afford the best fish. Pike, if we can get it. Eel, certainly." "And sweets?" Cook asks. The last time the guild officers came, they praised those little spiced cakes. "Yes, with plenty of cinnamon and ginger, and we'll use saffron in the sauce for the main dish, show off the spice trade connection." This is where Margaret's role intersects directly with Edmund's business. By displaying their access to exotic spices in their food, they demonstrate the success of his trade. A merchant's table is never just about feeding people. It's a statement of wealth and connection. With the kitchen plans settled, Margaret moves to the small garden behind the house. Unlike country homes with large kitchen gardens, London townhouses have limited space. Still, Margaret maintains a small plot of essential herbs: rosemary, sage, thyme, and precious saffron crocuses. In the cramped growing conditions of the city, every sprig matters. As she checks the plants, she hears a commotion from the street, raised voices and rapid footsteps. Curious, she moves to the garden gate and peers out into the narrow alley that runs behind the row of houses. A woman hurries past, her expression worried. It's Eliza Cooper, wife of the barrel maker whose workshop sits at the end of the lane. "What's happening?" Margaret calls. Eliza stops, recognizing her. "Fire on Fish Street," she says breathlessly. "They're calling for help to form a bucket line." Fire. The word sends a chill through Margaret. Nothing terrifies Londoners more than fire. The closely packed wooden houses can burn with frightening speed, and a blaze that starts in one building can quickly consume an entire street. "How bad?" Margaret asks. "Just starting when John left to help," Eliza says, referring to her husband. "But with this wind..." She doesn't need to finish. With a westerly wind, a fire on Fish Street could potentially spread towards Soppers Lane if not contained quickly. "I'll send the apprentices," Margaret says decisively, "and check our water barrels. Fire preparation is another of Margaret's responsibilities." Every London household maintains barrels of water specifically for fighting fires, a communal defence system where all are expected to help their neighbours. Hurrying back inside, Margaret finds Edmund already mobilising the senior apprentices. "William, Robert, John, go help with the bucket line," he orders. "Thomas, stay here and help prepare our own defences." As the older boys rush out, Edmund turns to Margaret. "It's 4 streets away, but with this wind..." "I know," she says. "I'll start moving the valuables to the cellar, just in case." This is their fire plan, developed after seeing neighbouring houses burn years ago. The stone cellar is the safest place for Edmund's account books, Margaret's silver cup, a wedding gift from her father, and the small chest containing their coins and Margaret's few pieces of jewellery. "I'll check the roof for falling embers," Edmund says, already moving toward the stairs. For the next hour, the household bustles with precautionary activity. Thomas proves useful, showing no fear of heights as he joins Edmund on the roof. The children are kept occupied by Agnes, who tells them it's just a drill, no need to frighten them unnecessarily. From the upper windows, Margaret can see smoke rising several streets away, but it doesn't seem to be spreading toward them. Finally, William returns, sooty but relieved. "It's contained," he reports. 3 houses burned, but they formed the bucket line in time. The wind shifted, which helped. Margaret offers a silent prayer of thanks. London has seen entire districts destroyed by fire in the past. This time, they were lucky. With the excitement over, the household returns to Sunday routine. Margaret uses the quiet afternoon hours to work on household accounts, a task she shares with Edmund. While he manages the business ledgers, she keeps track of household expenses, servants' wages, and daily purchases. Sitting at the small table in the solar, the private family room above the hall, Margaret opens her account book. Unlike most merchant wives who keep records with tally sticks or memory, Margaret writes everything down. It's a skill Edmund taught her early in their marriage, recognizing her aptitude for numbers. The book reveals the complex economics of running a substantial household. Last week's entries include payments for firewood, candles, cloth for new bed linens, shoes for Henry, wages for the servants, and charitable donations to the parish poor fund. Margaret reviews each item, calculating their current financial position. The potential feast for guild officers will be expensive, perhaps £5 total, a significant sum, but if it helps secure the warden position for Edmund, the investment will be worthwhile. Wardens receive special trading privileges and connections that could be worth far more than the cost of one elaborate meal. As she works, Catherine slips into the room, her reading lesson with Agnes apparently finished. "Mother, can I help?" she asks, peering at the account book. Margaret smiles. "Come sit," she says, patting the bench beside her. "It's time you learned more about household management." Catherine settles next to her mother, her small face serious. At 8, she's already showing signs of the same practicality that Margaret prides herself on. "This is how we track our spending," Margaret explains, pointing to the columns of figures. "Every penny must be accounted for, or we won't know if we're living within our means." Like when Cook asks for more money for the market, Catherine asks. Exactly. I need to know if she's spending wisely or being wasteful. Margaret turns a page. See here, last month we spent more on candles than usual. That's because the days are getting shorter, and we need more light. Catherine studies the neat figures. Will I need to know this when I'm married? Yes, especially if you marry a merchant, Margaret says. A foolish wife can ruin even a successful businessman. Many men are excellent at earning money but careless about spending it. Like father with his feasts? Catherine asks innocently. Margaret stifles a laugh. The child misses nothing. Your father's feasts are business investments, not mere extravagance, but yes, sometimes I must remind him to balance ambition with prudence. She turns another page in the book. Look here, this is where I record special expenses, like your education. Catherine sees the entry for her reading lessons with the parish clerk, a few pence each week, but a significant investment in a daughter's future. Unlike peasant girls who learn only household skills, merchant daughters often receive basic education in reading and numbers. Will I learn accounting too? Catherine asks. If you wish, Margaret says. A merchant's wife should understand her husband's business. How else can she help manage it when he's away on trading journeys? This is the reality of merchant-class marriages. They're economic partnerships as much as familial ones. When Edmund travels to Flanders or France to arrange spice shipments, Margaret oversees not just the household, but many aspects of the business as well. She can check inventories, supervise apprentices, and even conduct basic transactions with regular customers. A knock at the door interrupts their lesson. It's Berta, looking concerned. Mistress, that boy Matthew seems worse, she says. His breathing's gone strange. Margaret rises immediately. Stay here, she tells Catherine. Continue practicing your sums. In the apprentice's attic, Matthew lies on his pallet, his breathing laboured and his face flushed with fever. Margaret places a hand on his forehead, burning hot. How long has he been like this? She demands of Thomas, who's sitting nearby. Just this past hour, Thomas says, looking scared. He was talking earlier, but now he just moans. Margaret makes a quick decision. Thomas, run to Master Green the apothecary. Tell him we need feverfew and something for a chest inflammation. Quickly now. As Thomas scurries off, Margaret examines Matthew more closely. The boy's illness has progressed rapidly, too rapidly for comfort. She's seen cases like this before, where a simple cough transforms into something deadly within days. Berta, bring clean cloths and cool water, she orders, and find Edmund. While waiting, Margaret loosens Matthew's tunic and props him up with a folded blanket to ease his breathing. The boy's eyes flutter open briefly, unfocused and glassy. My mother? He murmurs. Shh, Margaret soothes. Rest now. We're caring for you. Edmund arrives, his expression grave as he assesses the situation. Should we send for the physician? He asks quietly. Margaret nods. And perhaps the priest as well. They both know what this means. If the boy's condition is serious enough to warrant both doctor and priest, his chances are poor. An apprentice's death isn't just a personal tragedy. It affects the household's reputation and requires careful management with the guild and the boy's family. I'll send William, Edmund says, and I'll write to Matthew's father in case he needs to come. As Edmund leaves, Margaret continues tending to the sick boy. This too is part of her role as the household's female head, nursing the ill, whether family members or servants or apprentices. In a world without hospitals, home care is the only option for all but the destitute, who might seek help at church-run almshouses. Berta returns with water and cloths, and together they work to cool Matthew's fever. The boy drifts in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for his mother, sometimes lying terrifyingly still. Thomas returns breathless from the apothecary, carrying a small packet of herbs. Master Green says to make a tea with these, he explains, and also to rub this salve on his chest. Margaret takes the remedies. Thank you, Thomas. Now go help cook with dinner preparations. But I want to help Matthew, the boy protests. The best help you can give is to keep the household running, Margaret says firmly. Too many people in a sick room only make things worse. Reluctantly, Thomas leaves. Margaret brews the medicinal tea using the small brazier kept in the attic for winter warming. The bitter smell fills the small space as she coaxes Matthew to drink small sips. Hours pass as Margaret maintains her vigil. The physician arrives, an expensive visit that will cost Edmund several shillings, and confirms what Margaret already suspects. Lung fever, potentially fatal, especially for someone weakened by previous illness. Keep him warm, continue the herbal tea and pray, the physician advises after examining the boy. I'll return tomorrow if he survives the night. As dusk falls, Margaret finally leaves Matthew in Berta's care and returns downstairs. The household has continued functioning in her absence. Cook has prepared a simple supper, Agnes has overseen the children's evening activities, and Edmund has managed the apprentice's duties. This is the mark of a well-run merchant household. It can adapt to crises without falling into chaos. Each person knows their responsibilities and can adjust when necessary. The hierarchy is clear but flexible, unlike the rigid structures of noble houses or the desperate scramble of peasant families. At supper, the mood is subdued. Matthew's illness casts a shadow over the household, reminding everyone of life's fragility even within the relative security of guild membership. Will Matthew die? Henry asks bluntly with a child's directness. Margaret exchanges a glance with Edmund. They never shield their children from life's realities. Another difference between merchant families and nobility, who often keep their children insulated from unpleasantness. He's very ill, Margaret says gently. We're doing everything we can to help him. If he does die, Edmund adds, it will be in a clean bed with proper care, not abandoned like so many poor souls. That's one blessing of being part of this household. The answer seems to satisfy Henry, who returns to his soup. Catherine remains quiet, thoughtful, beyond her years. After the meal, as the household prepares for bed, Margaret finds a moment alone with Edmund in their chamber. If Matthew doesn't survive, she says quietly, it will be the second apprentice we've lost in 3 years. Edmund nods grimly. I know, the guild might question whether there's something unwholesome about our household. This is a serious concern. In a society where disease is poorly understood, patterns of illness can be attributed to moral failings or divine disfavour. 2 dead apprentices could suggest the gardeners are either negligent or somehow cursed. We've done everything properly, Margaret insists. Better care than most masters provide. I know, Edmund sighs, but perception matters as much as reality, especially now when I'm seeking advancement. Margaret takes his hand. If the worst happens, we'll manage it carefully. A generous funeral, proper notification of his family, perhaps a donation to the guild's welfare fund in his name. Even in grief, there are political considerations, another reality of life in the complex social web of London's merchant class. As they prepare for bed, Margaret performs her nightly ritual, checking that the fire is banked safely, the doors secured, and the household quiet. From the attic comes the sound of coughing. Matthew still struggles for breath. From the apprentices' palates comes the softer sound of whispered prayers for their companion. In the darkness of their bedchamber, Margaret lies awake long after Edmund falls asleep. Her mind works through contingency plans for Matthew's potential death, for the upcoming guild feast, for Catherine's education, for the family's advancement. A merchant wife's work is never done, even in the quiet hours of night, but Margaret wouldn't trade her position for any other. Unlike peasant women beaten down by endless toil and childbearing, or noble women treated as political pawns, she enjoys a unique balance of domestic authority and business partnership. The guild system that supports Edmund's trade also indirectly empowers her, creating a space where women can be more than just wives and mothers. They can be accountants, managers, and even unofficial business partners. Not equal to men, certainly, but far more influential than most women in medieval England. As sleep finally approaches, Margaret's last thoughts are of the household account book and tomorrow's market visit. In the complex ecosystem of London's merchant class, she's as essential to the family's survival and advancement as Edmund himself, the twin pillars upon which rests the growing power of medieval England's urban middle class. 2 weeks after Alderman Fraser's visit, the Gardner household buzzes with frantic activity. The guild feast that will secure Edmund's nomination as warden is tonight, and everything must be perfect. The Great Hall of the Grocers' Guild near Cheapside will host the event, but tradition dictates that the prospective warden provides the food and drink from his own household. In the kitchen, cook barks orders like a military commander. More saffron in that sauce, the colour's too pale. And where's the pastry for the spiced pears? 2 temporary kitchen helpers, women hired specifically for this occasion, scurry about, their faces flushed from the roaring fire. Berta and Agnes have abandoned their usual duties to assist, while Margaret oversees everything, clipboard in hand. The eels are properly cleaned, she asks, inspecting a large platter. Yes, mistress, cook replies, soaked in wine and vinegar since yesterday, just as you instructed. Margaret nods approval. And the spice mixtures for each dish? Prepared according to your specifications, cook confirms, gesturing to a row of small earthenware pots, each containing a different blend of Edmund's precious spices. This feast represents weeks of planning and a significant financial investment. 20 of London's most influential grocers will attend, along with select members of allied guilds, mercers, drapers, and goldsmiths. Each dish must demonstrate not only the family's wealth, but also Edmund's expertise in the spice trade. The quality and rarity of seasonings will speak directly to his qualifications for warden. Upstairs, Edmund paces in his chamber, dressed in his finest clothes, a deep blue woolen tunic with actual silk embroidery at the collar, imported from Italy at ruinous expense. Around his neck hangs a heavy silver chain, marking him as a full member of the guild. His usually practical leather belt has been replaced with one decorated with silver mounts. "William," he calls. "Are the apprentices ready?" William appears at the door, himself dressed in new clothes provided by Edmund for the occasion. "Yes, master, all except Matthew." Edmund's expression darkens. In the 2 weeks since Matthew fell ill, the boy has neither improved nor died. He lingers in a state of fevered weakness, unable to work but still consuming resources. The physician visits regularly, another drain on finances, but offers little hope. "Keep him comfortable," Edmund says, "and make sure someone stays with him tonight. We can't risk a fire while we're all at the hall." "Thomas has volunteered," William says. Edmund raises an eyebrow. "The newest apprentice? He should be at the feast, learning how these things work." "He and Matthew have become friends," William explains, and Thomas said. He hesitates. "Said what?" That such grand affairs made him uncomfortable, that he'd rather be useful here. Edmund considers this. The boy continues to surprise him, first with his aptitude for figures, now with this demonstration of loyalty to a fellow apprentice, not the blind ambition most young men show, but perhaps something more valuable. Very well, Edmund decides. But have him study the spice inventory while he watches over Matthew. No reason he can't be productive. William nods and withdraws. Edmund checks his appearance one last time in the small mirror, an expensive luxury but necessary for a man of his growing station. Tonight will determine whether years of careful manoeuvring translate into real advancement within the guild hierarchy. Downstairs, he finds Margaret directing the loading of food into covered containers for transport to the guild hall. She too is dressed for the occasion in her finest kirtle of dark green wool, with a silk belt and a gold-trimmed headdress that covers her hair completely, as befits a respectable merchant's wife. "Is everything ready?" he asks. "Nearly," she says, checking off items on her list. "The swan is giving us trouble. Cook says the neck keeps breaking when they try to redress it after cooking." "Swan?" Edmund frowns. "I don't recall approving swan for the menu." Margaret gives him a look. "Alderman Fraser mentioned last week that swan is his favourite. I made adjustments." Edmund nods, suppressing a smile. This is why their partnership works. Margaret catches the details he misses, the small personal touches that can sway opinions more effectively than grand gestures. "The children?" he asks, ready and behaving themselves for now. "Agnes will stay with them here." Catherine was disappointed not to attend, but I reminded her that guild feasts aren't for children. Unlike court banquets where noble children might be displayed to demonstrate family lineage, guild events are strictly for members and their wives. Children remain at home, part of the clear separation between domestic and guild life. A knock at the door announces the arrival of hired porters with a handcart to transport the feast to the guild hall. Edmund supervises as they carefully load the precious cargo, dozens of dishes from simple bread and cheese to elaborate creations like the troublesome swan, now successfully reassembled with its neck arched gracefully. As the last items are secured, Edmund gathers the household in the hall for final instructions. "William, John, and Robert will accompany us to serve at the feast," he announces. "Berta and Cook will assist in the Guildhall kitchen. Thomas will remain here with Agnes to watch the children and tend to Matthew. The rest of you know your duties." He looks around at the assembled faces, servants, apprentices, and family. "Tonight matters not just for me, but for all of us. My advancement means greater prosperity for this household." With that, the procession sets off toward Cheapside, Edmund and Margaret walking with careful dignity while the apprentices and servants manage the handcart over London's uneven streets. The early evening light casts long shadows as they navigate the crowded thoroughfares, stepping carefully around piles of refuse and the occasional drunk already stumbling home from a tavern. The grocer's hall comes into view, a large stone building with the guild's camel emblem carved above the door. Unlike private homes built primarily of wood, the guild hall is constructed to impress and endure, a physical manifestation of the guild's permanence and power. Inside, the great hall is already being prepared. Long trestle tables form a U-shape with the high table at the head for the most senior members. Apprentices from other households scurry about laying cloths and setting places with pewter plates and cups. The walls are hung with tapestries showing exotic lands where spices originate, imaginative scenes of India and the islands of the East where pepper vines grow and nutmeg trees flourish. Alderman Fraser greets them at the entrance. "Edmund, Margaret right on time. I've just been discussing your nomination with Master Phillips and Master Thornton. Most favourable indeed." Edmund inclines his head respectfully. "We're honoured to provide the feast tonight. Margaret, has overseen every detail personally. As a good merchant's wife should, Fraser says with approval, barely glancing at Margaret despite the compliment. This is typical. Women are acknowledged for their domestic contributions, but largely invisible in guild politics. "The wine has arrived from your cellar?" Edmund asks. "Indeed. 3 types, Rhenish white, Bordeaux red, and a special sweet wine from Cyprus that I'm told pairs excellently with spiced desserts." This is another aspect of guild feasts. Members contribute according to their specialties. As a spice merchant, Edmund provides the food. Fraser, who has connections with wine importers, supplies the drinks. Others will have furnished the table linens, the musicians, or the decorations. The hall gradually fills with guild members and their wives. The men greet each other with the easy familiarity of long association, discussing business and city politics. The women cluster separately, exchanging household news and subtle competitive comments about their husbands' prospects. Edmund works the room skillfully, stopping to speak with each important member. Margaret does the same among the wives, knowing that female approval can influence male votes. William, John, and Robert stand ready with the other apprentices, waiting to serve the meal, while absorbing the social dynamics that may one day govern their own careers. At precisely the hour of 7, as marked by the nearby church bells, Guildmaster Howard enters, a tall man with a grey beard and the confident bearing of someone who has wielded power for decades. He takes his place at the centre of the high table. The other members arrange themselves according to rank and seniority, a seating order as rigid as any royal court. Edmund and Margaret find their places about halfway down the right side, respectable but not yet prominent. Tonight's success could move them several places closer to the high table at future gatherings. The Guildmaster rises and speaks. "Brothers of the worshipful company of grocers and honoured wives, we gather tonight in fellowship and prosperity. Before we feast, let us pray for continued divine favour on our endeavours." All heads bow as he recites a Latin prayer, followed by specific invocations to St. Antoninus, the guild's patron saint. Religion and business are inseparable in guild life, with spiritual brotherhood providing the foundation for commercial cooperation. After the prayer, the master makes announcements. Recent trade agreements, disputes settled, new apprentices registered. Finally, he comes to the matter of greatest interest to Edmund. "Brothers, the position of junior warden falls vacant next month with the advancement of Brother Thomas Knowles to senior warden. The Council of Elders has considered several worthy candidates and will present their nomination for vote at the Michaelmas meeting." Edmund keeps his expression neutral, though his heart races. Fraser had promised the nomination was virtually assured, but in guild politics, nothing is certain until formally announced. The feast begins. Apprentices, including Edmund's 3, bring in the first course, lighter dishes including the freshwater fish Edmund sourced from upstream of London, where the Thames runs cleaner. Each dish is announced as it arrives, with special mention of its seasoning. "Pike in almond milk sauce with ginger and galingale," calls the guildmaster's apprentice as the platter is set before the high table. The senior members are served first, then the dishes work their way down the tables in strict order of precedence. The wives are served alongside their husbands, though expected to eat more delicately and in smaller portions. As the first course progresses, Edmund notices with satisfaction the appreciative murmurs as members taste the carefully spiced dishes. Margaret has calculated perfectly, enough exotic seasonings to impress without overwhelming the palate, demonstrating both access to rare ingredients and the discernment to use them properly. The second course brings heavier meats, including the reconstructed swan, which draws actual applause when presented. Edmund sees Fraser nodding approval from his place near the head of the table. So far, so good. Between courses, Guildmaster Howard rises again. Brothers, as is our custom, we have business to discuss while we refresh ourselves. First, the matter of the new trade regulations proposed by the Hanse merchants. This is how guild feasts differ from noble banquets. While the food and ceremony are similar, actual business occurs throughout the meal. Decisions affecting all of London's spice trade will be made between bites of swan and sips of Bordeaux. The discussion becomes technical quickly, with members debating tariff rates and import restrictions. Edmund listens carefully, offering comments when appropriate, but mostly observing who holds real influence. Fraser speaks often and is heeded, a good sign for Edmund's prospects, given the alderman's support. During a pause in the debate, Fraser stands. Master Howard, if I might raise a different matter, the nomination for junior warden. The guildmaster nods permission, though his expression suggests this isn't the proper moment. Fraser continues anyway. I wish to speak in favour of Brother Edmund Gardner. His recent success in securing the Malabar pepper shipment demonstrates his trading acumen, and his generous contribution to the Guild's building fund shows his commitment to our collective future. Several members nod agreement. Edmund maintains a modest expression while his mind races. This public endorsement from Fraser essentially confirms the nomination. Unless someone raises an objection now, the Michaelmas vote will be a formality. Master Howard looks around the table. Are there other candidates the council should consider before finalising the nomination? A tense moment follows. Edmund scans the faces of those who might oppose him, particularly Master Reynolds, whose own ambitions for the position are well known. Reynolds seems about to speak when the third course arrives, perfect timing that Margaret has surely orchestrated. The distraction of elaborately spiced pastries and the sweet wine from Cyprus interrupts whatever Reynolds intended to say. By the time the serving is complete, the moment has passed, and Master Howard moves the discussion to other matters. Margaret catches Edmund's eye from across the table and gives the slightest nod. They've weathered the critical moment. The nomination is all but secured. As the feast continues into the evening, with more food and wine than any person could reasonably consume, the atmosphere grows increasingly convivial. Business talk gives way to stories and jests. A group of musicians plays softly in the corner. Members circulate, moving from their assigned seats to speak with friends and allies. Edmund finds himself approached by Philip Malpas, a senior member with extensive connections to the royal court. Gardner, Malpas says, his voice slightly slurred from wine. Fraser speaks highly of your knowledge of Eastern trade routes. I've had some success in that arena, Edmund acknowledges modestly. The king's household needs reliable spice supplies, Malpas continues. Royal favour can be profitable. Edmund understands immediately. Malpas is offering access to royal contracts, the most lucrative and prestigious business available, but such access would come with obligations, both financial and political. I would be honoured to discuss such possibilities, Edmund says carefully. Perhaps after my nomination is confirmed. Malpas nods, understanding the caution. Of course, the guild must come first, but remember who your friends are, Gardner. Advancement requires support from above. The conversation illustrates perfectly how guild politics extend beyond the organisation itself, reaching into city government and even royal affairs. The merchants of London's Great 12 companies form a network of influence that rivals the old nobility in practical power, if not in title or land. As the evening progresses, Edmund makes his way to Fraser's side. The feast seems well received, he comments. Fraser pats his stomach. Excellent fare. Your wife has a gift for seasoning. That swan was particularly fine. Margaret will be pleased to hear it. She added it specifically knowing your preference. Fraser smiles knowingly. Did she now? A perceptive woman, your Margaret. Lucky man. This is as close as guild conversation comes to acknowledging the crucial role wives play in members' success. The fiction that men alone conduct business persists, even when everyone knows better. About the nomination, Edmund ventures. Master Reynolds seemed ready to object. Fraser waves a dismissive hand. Reynolds has overreached. His last shipment from Venice was underweight, and he tried to blame the Italian merchants. They've since taken their business elsewhere. I hadn't heard, Edmund says, genuinely surprised. Guild gossip usually travels fast. It's not widely known yet. The council has kept it quiet to avoid embarrassing the guild, but it makes him unfit for warden. We can't have someone who can't maintain proper trade relationships. Edmund absorbs this information carefully. Reynolds's misfortune has smoothed his own path, but it also serves as a warning. In the guild world, reputation is everything. One misstep can undo years of careful advancement. As the feast concludes with a final round of spiced wine and small sweet cakes flavoured with cinnamon and ginger, Guildmaster Howard rises for a final address. Brothers, I thank you for your fellowship tonight. The council will meet tomorrow to finalise the nomination for Junior Warden with the vote to follow at Michaelmas. May God and St. Antoninus guide our deliberations. With that, the formal portion of the evening ends. Some members depart immediately, while others linger to continue private conversations. Edmund and Margaret oversee the collection of their serving dishes and the distribution of leftover food, some to the apprentices and servants, some to be sent to the nearby almshouse as a charitable gesture that also demonstrates the guild's generosity to the wider community. As they prepare to leave, Fraser approaches one last time. Gardner, a word in private. Edmund nods to Margaret, who continues directing the clean-up while he steps aside with the alderman. It's done, Fraser says without preamble. The nomination is yours. The vote will be a formality. Edmund inclines his head gratefully. I'm honoured by the council's confidence. Just remember your commitments, Fraser says. £20 to the building fund, preferential rates on pepper for guild functions, and your support when I stand for election as Alderman of Cordwainer Ward next year. Of course, Edmund agrees. The price of advancement is always paid in both coin and political support. One more thing, Fraser adds, his voice lower. There are rumours about illness in your household. An apprentice. Edmund tenses. News of Matthew's lingering sickness has reached the guild leadership. Exactly what he feared. A lung fever, he acknowledges. We've had the physician attending him regularly. Fraser nods. Good. Some masters neglect their apprentices' health. Bad for the guild's reputation. But prolonged illness can also suggest unwholesome conditions. The implied threat is clear. If Matthew dies, questions might be raised about Edmund's household management, potentially jeopardising his new position before it's even officially granted. The boy shows signs of improvement. Edmund lies smoothly. I expect him to recover fully with continued care. Excellent, Fraser says, appearing satisfied. A warden must demonstrate proper stewardship in all things, including the well-being of those under his authority. With a final meaningful look, Fraser departs. Edmund rejoins Margaret, his expression giving nothing away. Well? She asks quietly as they begin the walk home, apprentices and servants following with the empty containers. The nomination is secured, Edmund confirms. But Fraser mentioned Matthew's illness. The guild is aware and concerned. Margaret's lips tighten. The physician visits again tomorrow. I'll tell him to be more aggressive with the treatments. They both know what this means. More expensive remedies, perhaps bloodletting, or other desperate measures. The boy might die anyway, but they must be seen to spare no expense in his care. The streets of London are dark now, lit only by the occasional lantern hanging outside a tavern or watchman's post. The apprentices carry torches to light their way, the flickering flames casting strange shadows on the overhanging upper stories of the houses they pass. If we become Warden's family, Margaret says quietly, we should consider moving to a better street, nearer the Guildhall perhaps. Edmund nods. Location matters in London's complex social geography. Soppers Lane is respectable, but a warden should live closer to the centre of guild activity. There's that house on Milk Street that came available when old Simmons died, he suggests. 3 stories, stone foundation, private well in the courtyard. I'll inquire about the lease tomorrow, Margaret says, already planning. This is how advancement works in their world. A successful feast leads to a guild position, which necessitates a more prestigious address, which will host more important gatherings, leading to further opportunities. Each step carefully calculated, each investment expected to yield specific returns. When they finally reach home, they find Thomas sitting by Matthew's bedside, a book of inventory records open on his lap. The sick boy sleeps fitfully, his breathing raspy, but not worse than when they left. Any change? Margaret asks. Thomas shakes his head. He woke twice, took some broth, then slept again. The fever seems the same. Edmund studies the scene thoughtfully. Thomas has positioned himself by the window to catch the moonlight for reading, while keeping a damp cloth ready to cool Matthew's forehead. Despite missing the feast, an important learning opportunity, the boy has made productive use of his time. You did well, Edmund says. Go down to the kitchen. Cook saved some feast dishes for you. Thomas's eyes widen. Thank you, Master. He gathers his papers and heads downstairs, but not before carefully adjusting Matthew's blanket. Left alone with Margaret and the sleeping apprentice, Edmund speaks his mind. If the boy dies, we'll need to manage it carefully. A generous funeral, donations to his parish church in his name. And if he lives but remains too weak to work, Margaret asks practically. Edmund sighs. Then we face a harder choice. An invalid apprentice is a drain on resources, but dismissing him would look heartless. Let's hope the physician brings better news tomorrow, Margaret says. Together they make their final round of the house, checking that doors are barred and fires safely banked. The children sleep soundly, unaware of the complex calculations that govern their parents' world. The remaining apprentices and servants have settled in their respective quarters. In their own chamber, Edmund finally allows himself to relax. It went well tonight, he says, removing his silver chain. Better than I expected. Reynolds' trading troubles certainly helped, Margaret observes, unpinning her headdress. Lucky timing, Edmund gives her a sidelong look. Luck? Or did you happen to mention the underweight shipment to Goodwife Fraser when you visited last week? Margaret's expression remains innocent. I merely commented that Italian merchants are becoming more particular about their business partners. If she drew conclusions from that, well, Edmund laughs softly. You're more dangerous than any spice merchant wife. Someone must look after our interests, she says practically. The guild may be a brotherhood, but every brother still competes for position. As they prepare for bed, Edmund reflects on the evening's success. The feast has accomplished its purpose, securing his nomination for junior warden. From there, the path leads potentially to senior warden, then perhaps alderman, even mayor someday. Each step builds on the last, a careful ascent through the interlocking hierarchies of guild, city, and royal favour. This is the genius of the guild system. It creates a structure where talented men can rise based on ability and cunning rather than birth alone, not easily or quickly, and not without setbacks, but still a path upward that simply doesn't exist for those outside the urban centres and their craft organisations. As Edmund drifts towards sleep, his mind fills with visions of future feasts, grander affairs where he sits closer to the high table, then at it, then perhaps one day at its centre. The spice trade that began as merely a way to make a living has become a route to power and security far beyond what any of his farmer ancestors could have imagined. In the middle distance of medieval England's social structure, above the desperate struggle of peasants but below the inherited privilege of nobility, the urban guild system has created something revolutionary, a middle class with the ability to shape its own destiny. While the Gardner household settles into sleep after their successful guild feast, the City of London transitions into its nocturnal rhythms. The streets that bustled with merchants and craftsmen during daylight now belong to a different population: the night watch, tavern-goers, criminals, and those unfortunate souls with nowhere else to go. John Baxter adjusts his thick woolen cloak against the autumn chill as he begins his rounds. At 53, he served as a watchman for Cordwainer Ward for nearly 20 years, patrolling the same streets so often he could walk them blindfolded. Tonight, he's breaking in a new partner, young Peter Thatcher, barely 20 and new to the watch. "Keep your lantern high," John instructs as they turn onto Soppers Lane where the Gardner house stands dark and quiet. "Shows folks we're about, discourages mischief." Peter nods, raising his lantern. The light casts eerie shadows against the timber-framed houses that lean toward each other across the narrow street. Most windows are shuttered tight, with only the occasional glow of a night candle visible through cracks. "This is a good street," John says, nodding toward the Gardner residence. "Spice merchants mostly, guild members. They pay extra for us to check their doors through the night." "Extra?" Peter asks. "Course, the city pays our base wage, but it's the private arrangements that make this job worth doing. 5 shillings quarterly from each household on this lane for special attention. Master Gardner there pays 6. He's particular about security." This is the reality of medieval London's night security, a patchwork system where the official city watch is supplemented by private arrangements between watchmen and wealthy households. Those who can afford it buy extra protection, those who can't take their chances. As they approach the Gardner house, John checks the heavy wooden door, securely barred from inside, as expected, and then examines the shutters on the ground floor windows. "All tight here," he murmurs with satisfaction. "Let's move on to the warehouse district. That's where we'll likely see trouble, if there's any to be had." They continue their patrol, passing from the residential streets of Soppers Lane into the commercial areas where goods are stored in anticipation of tomorrow's trading. Here, the buildings are larger, with fewer windows and more substantial doors. Many have iron grills securing any potential entry points. "Gardner keeps his spices in that warehouse," John says, pointing to a sturdy stone building with a distinctive camel carving above the door, the symbol of the Grocers Guild. "Valuable stuff, pound of pepper's worth more than you'll earn all year." Peter whistles softly. "No wonder they want extra watches." "Aye, and we're not the only ones they pay," John says. "Most merchants hire private guards for their warehouses. Guild members share the expense, taking turns." As if on cue, a figure emerges from the shadows near the warehouse, a burly man with a cudgel in one hand and a small lantern in the other. "Evening, Walter," John calls quietly. The guard nods in recognition. "Quiet night so far, John. New lad with you?" "This is Peter. Learning the rounds." Walter gives Peter an appraising look. "Word of advice, boy. Don't go poking into the alleys behind the Dyer's Guild Hall. Pack of dogs there that'll take your leg off soon as look at you." Peter nods nervously, and the watchmen continue their circuit. The relationship between the official city watch and private guards is generally cooperative. They share information and sometimes assist each other, recognizing their common purpose in protecting the wealth that flows through London's commercial heart. "We had excitement here 2 nights back," John tells Peter as they pass another warehouse. "Caught 3 men trying to break in through the roof, wanted the wool bales inside, each worth a king's ransom with the Flanders trade booming." "What happened to them?" Peter asks. "One fell and broke his neck. The other 2 are in Newgate prison awaiting the magistrate. Likely be hanged." John's tone is matter of fact. Theft from a guild warehouse is a serious offence. The guilds have influence with the courts. This, too, is part of London's security system. Harsh public punishment for those who threaten commercial interests. The relative wealth of guild members makes them targets, but their collective power ensures that the city's justice system protects them vigorously. As they turn down a particularly dark alley, John suddenly stops, raising his hand for silence. Peter freezes, his heart pounding. Ahead, barely visible in the gloom, several figures are huddled around the back entrance of a building. "That's Master Phillips's cloth warehouse," John whispers. "No one should be there at this hour." He reaches beneath his cloak and withdraws a horn. One long blast would summon other watchmen and alert the neighbourhood to trouble. But before he can raise it to his lips, one of the figures by the door straightens and calls out, "Hold, watchman, it's Alderman Fraser." John hesitates, then lowers the horn as the man steps forward into the pool of lantern light. Indeed, it's John Fraser, the same alderman who supported Edmund Gardner's nomination at the feast earlier that evening. With him are 2 other men whom John recognises as guild members. "Alderman," John says, bowing slightly. "Unusual hour for business." Fraser smiles thinly. "Special shipment, Venetian silk that arrived late, too valuable to leave on the docks, so we're securing it here until morning." He gestures to a small cart nearby, covered with oilcloth. "Master Phillips gave us his key." John nods, though his expression remains sceptical. Even for valuable goods, middle-of-the-night transfers are unusual and typically arranged in advance with the watch captain. "Of course, Alderman. Would you like an escort to ensure your safety?" "Unnecessary," Fraser says quickly. "We've nearly finished. Better you continue your regular patrol." John hesitates only momentarily before nodding again. "As you wish. Good night, gentlemen." As they walk away, Peter whispers, "Was that really legitimate business?" John gives him a sharp look. "Never question an alderman directly, lad, but to answer you, probably not entirely. The guilds operate in grey areas sometimes, goods arriving that haven't paid full customs duties, or special arrangements with foreign merchants that bend the rules." "Shouldn't we report it?" John laughs softly. "To whom?" "The sheriffs are guild members themselves. The mayor is elected from the alderman. London's governance and its commerce are 2 sides of the same coin." He pats the young man's shoulder. "Besides, we're paid to prevent dangerous crime, robbery, murder, arson. Guild politics isn't our concern." This complex relationship between law enforcement and guild power is central to medieval London's social order. The watch maintains general peace and protects property, but rarely interferes with the activities of powerful guild members, even when those activities skirt the law's edges. Their patrol continues through the maze of streets and alleys that make up this section of London. Most areas are quiet, with only the occasional drunk staggering home from a tavern or stray dog scavenging in refuse piles. But as they approach the river, the character of the night changes. Near the Thames, a different London emerges, rougher, more desperate. Here, even in the middle of the night, activity continues around warehouses and wharves where goods are loaded and unloaded according to the tide's schedule rather than the sun's. Stay alert here, John warns. This is where the foreign sailors gather. Flemish, Italian, Spanish. They keep different hours and have different ways. Indeed, several taverns near the water remain open, spilling light and noise into the street. Men speaking a variety of languages cluster in doorways or around small fires, drinking and gambling away their sea pay. The guild merchants need these men and their ships, John explains, but don't want them wandering throughout the city, so the riverside taverns stay open all night, keeping the sailors contained in one area. As they pass one particularly rowdy establishment, a fight spills out into the street, two men grappling while a circle of onlookers cheer and place bets. John sighs and marches forward, his substantial frame and official lantern causing the crowd to part reluctantly. "Break it up!" he commands, grabbing one fighter by the collar and yanking him backward. Peter, following his lead, attempts to restrain the other man but receives an elbow to the stomach for his trouble. John's response is immediate and practiced. His cudgel swings in a short arc connecting with the aggressive man's knee with a solid thunk. The sailor drops, cursing in what sounds like Portuguese. "I said break it up," John repeats calmly. "Take your grievances back inside or move along. No street brawling in my ward." The crowd grumbles but disperses, dragging the injured sailor back into the tavern. No one directly challenges the watch. Even drunk sailors know better than to escalate a confrontation with city authorities. "You all right?" John asks Peter, who's still catching his breath. "Fine," the younger man wheezes on. "Just surprised me." Lesson 1 of the night watch. Always expect a swing, John says. Lesson 2. Hit first if you think one's coming. They continue their patrol, moving gradually away from the river and back toward the more respectable streets. As they approach a small church, a huddled figure in the doorway catches John's attention. It's a woman wrapped in a tattered cloak with a small bundle clutched to her chest. John approaches cautiously. "Evening, mistress. Church isn't open till morning mass." The woman looks up, her face young but haggard with exhaustion or illness. "Please," she whispers, "just till dawn. We've nowhere else." The bundle moves slightly, revealing itself as an infant, perhaps a few months old. John's weathered face softens. "What's your story, then?" "My husband was a journeyman baker," she says. "Died of fever last month. His master turned me out, said he couldn't feed mouths that couldn't work." This, too, is part of London's reality. The guild system provides security for its members, but can be merciless to those who fall outside its protection. A master's obligation to his journeyman doesn't necessarily extend to the journeyman's family after death. John reaches into his pocket and produces a small coin. "There's a widow on Bread Street who takes in women for a few pence a night. Tell her John the Watch sent you." He hesitates, then adds another coin. "And get something hot to eat first. Child needs a mother with strength." The woman's eyes fill with tears as she accepts the coins. "God bless you, watchman." As they walk away, Peter glances back at the woman hurrying toward Bread Street. "That was kind." John shrugs. Night watch isn't just about catching thieves. It's about knowing your streets, your people. That woman's husband paid his guild dues, same as any journeyman. She deserves better than a church doorway. But the baker master did nothing wrong by guild rules, John interrupts. Journeymen know the risks. It's why they save for their own shop, try to become masters themselves. The guild protects its full members well, but for everyone else, he gestures back toward the woman's retreating figure. Their patrol takes them back towards Sopper's Lane as the night deepens. Most of London is truly asleep now, with even the taverns growing quieter. Only the occasional call of competing watchmen, two of the clock and all's well, breaks the silence. As they turn onto the lane where the Gardner house stands, John suddenly tenses. His experienced eyes have caught something amiss, a subtle movement at the rear of the merchant's property. "Stay here," he whispers to Peter. "If I call or blow the horn, run for help." Moving with surprising stealth for his age and bulk, John edges along the shadows of the buildings until he has a clear view of the Gardner house's back courtyard. There, two figures are attempting to force the small door that leads to the kitchen. John watches silently, assessing the situation. These aren't opportunistic drunks or hungry vagrants. They're working methodically with proper tools, trying to defeat the door's lock without making noise. Professional thieves, then, likely aware of the valuable spices and trade goods sometimes kept in merchants' homes. Decision made, John draws his cudgel and steps into the open. "King's Peace," he calls, loudly enough to wake nearby households. "Stand where you are." The thieves startle, abandoning their tools as they spin to face the watchman. One immediately bolts for the narrow alley that runs behind the houses. The other, perhaps bolder or more desperate, draws a knife. "Back off, old man," he growls. "Night watch doesn't die for merchants' goods." John doesn't retreat. Instead, he blows 3 short blasts on his horn, the signal for trouble, then advances on the knife-wielding thief. What follows is brief but violent. The thief lunges, knife aimed at John's midsection. The watchman, despite his age, sidesteps with practiced ease and brings his cudgel down hard on the attacker's forearm. There's a crack of breaking bone and a howl of pain. The knife clatters to the cobblestones. Before the thief can recover, John delivers another blow to the back of his knee, dropping him to the ground. As the man falls, John kicks the knife away and plants a heavy boot on his chest. "Lie still if you want to see morning," he advises calmly. By now, lights have appeared in windows along the lane. The Gardner house door opens, revealing Edmund himself, hastily dressed and holding a heavy iron poker. Behind him stands William, the senior apprentice, with a similar improvised weapon. "What's happening?" Edmund demands, then sees John standing over the prone thief. Attempted burglary." "Seems so, Master Gardner," John confirms. "This one and another who ran off. They were working on your back door with professional tools." Edmund's expression darkens. "Guild rivals, perhaps, or someone who knows about the spice shipment." This is a constant concern for wealthy merchants, not just random theft, but targeted burglary by business competitors seeking to disrupt trade or steal valuable goods. The timing, so soon after Edmund's nomination for warden, seems particularly suspicious. More watchmen arrive. Responding to John's horn call, the injured thief is hauled to his feet, still clutching his broken arm and cursing steadily. "Take him to the ward lockup," John instructs his colleagues. "The sheriff can deal with him in the morning." As the thief is dragged away, Edmund approaches John. "Good work, watchman. You've saved me considerable loss." John nods respectfully. "Just doing my duty, Master Garner." Nevertheless, Edmund reaches into his robe and produces a silver penny. "For your vigilance." John accepts the coin with a small bow. This, too, is part of the system. Extra payments for watchmen who directly protect a guild member's interests. Not officially sanctioned, perhaps, but universally practiced. "I'll have men keep special watch on your property for the rest of the night," John promises. "With your recent nomination, you may be targeted by those who oppose your advancement." Edmund's eyebrows rise slightly. News travels fast. The watch hears many things, Master Gardener. Congratulations on your likely appointment as warden. After ensuring the Gardner house is again secure, John rejoins Peter, who has watched the entire confrontation from a safe distance. That was incredible, the young man says admiringly. You weren't afraid at all. John chuckles. Been doing this 20 years, lad. You learn to act without thinking too much. Fear comes later, when it's all over. As they resume their patrol, Peter asks, is it always like this, protecting the wealthy, getting extra coins? John considers the question seriously. The merchant guilds essentially run London. Their wealth flows down to everyone. They employ apprentices, journeymen servants, labourers. They fund the churches, maintain the walls, pay for public works. So yes, we protect their interests more carefully than some broken-down tenement full of labourers. He pauses, then adds, but a good watchman remembers that everyone deserves some protection. The baker's widow, the foreign sailors, they're all part of what makes the city work. Balance, lad, that's the key to the night watch. Their conversation is interrupted by the distant call of 3 of the clock and all's well from another watchman. John takes a deep breath of the cool night air, surveying the sleeping city around them. 4 more hours till dawn, he says. Let's check the eastern streets next. As they move away from Sopper's Lane, the Gardner house fades back into darkness. Its occupants return to sleep, secure in the knowledge that both official and unofficial protections surround them. The attempted burglary will become another link in the complex chain of obligations and favours that binds London's social classes together. Edmund will mention it to the sheriff, a fellow guild member. John will receive additional consideration from the watch captain for his vigilance. And the captured thief will face public punishment as an example to others who might threaten guild interests. This is London after dark, a world of shadows and shifting loyalties where the guild system extends its influence even into the night hours. The watchmen patrol, the private guards stand vigilant, and the city's commerce rests securely until dawn brings a new day of trading, crafting, and the endless dance of advancement through the medieval middle class. 10 years pass like the turning of a merchant's account book pages, steady, measured, marked by the careful recording of profits and losses, both financial and personal. Edmund Gardner, now in his 50th year, stands at the window of his counting room in the new house on Milk Street. The move from Sopper's Lane happened 8 years ago, shortly after his installation as junior warden of the Grocers Guild. From junior warden to senior warden took the expected 3 years, and now he's serving his 2nd year as master of the company, the highest position within the guild hierarchy. The room around him reflects his rise. Oak panelling imported from the Baltic, a desk of polished walnut, shelves lined with leather-bound account books. On the wall hangs his greatest pride, a painted portrait showing him in his guild regalia, a heavy gold chain around his neck, his hand resting on a globe to signify the international reach of his trade. A knock interrupts his thoughts. "Enter," he calls, turning from the window. Thomas, no longer the skinny farm boy but a solid young man of 24, steps into the room. As Edmund's senior apprentice, he now dresses in good quality wool, with a leather belt and even a small silver pin, marking him as being in the final year of his term. "The ship from Venice has docked, master," Thomas reports. "The captain sent word that our pepper shipment is complete, but the cinnamon is short by 3 sacks. Edmund nods, unsurprised. The situation in Alexandria grows worse. The Mamluk Sultan increases his tariffs every season. "Have you checked the quality?" "William is at the docks now," Thomas says, referring to William Fleming, once Edmund's apprentice, now a journeyman working toward his own mastership. "He'll report by evening." "Good." Edmund sits at his desk and opens a ledger. "And the preparations for Catherine's wedding feast?" Mistress Gardner has ordered everything. The mercer's hall is reserved for 3 days hence, and the musicians are confirmed. Edmund allows himself a small smile of satisfaction. Catherine's marriage to Richard Whittington, nephew of the famous Richard Whittington, who served 4 terms as London's mayor, represents the culmination of years of careful social positioning. At 18, his daughter's making a match that would have been unthinkable when Edmund was just a struggling spice merchant on Sopper's Lane. "And how is your own work progressing?" Edmund asks, looking up at Thomas. "Master Howard tells me your mastership project impressed the guild elders." Thomas's face brightens with pride. "They seemed pleased with my analysis of the eastern trade routes and potential new sources for nutmeg." "As well they should be. Few journeymen present such thorough research." Edmund closes his ledger. "You know that I've purchased your freedom from the guild registry?" This is significant news. When an apprentice completes his 7-year term, his master must officially release him by paying a fee to the guild. Without this, even a skilled worker cannot advance to journeyman status. "I'm deeply grateful, Master Gardener," Thomas says, bowing slightly. "Don't be grateful yet," Edmund says with a wry smile. "I've also spoken to the Guild Council about sponsoring your mastership application." Thomas's eyes widen. Becoming a master normally requires years as a journeyman, slowly saving enough capital to open a shop and pay the substantial mastership fees. Sponsorship from a guild officer like Edmund would accelerate the process dramatically. I don't know what to say," Thomas stammers. "Say nothing for now," Edmund advises, "but consider my proposal. I'm establishing a new trading office in Bristol to manage our western routes. It needs a reliable master to oversee it, someone with both intelligence and loyalty." The offer hangs in the air between them. An extraordinary opportunity for a young man who arrived 10 years ago with nothing but a small bundle of clothes and a desperate desire to escape rural poverty. "Think on it," Edmund says. "We'll speak more after Catherine's wedding." After Thomas leaves, Edmund remains at his desk, reflecting on the decade's transformations. His rise through the guild hierarchy has exceeded even his ambitious expectations. The Gardner trading network now extends from London to Bristol, with connections to Venice, Genoa, Flanders, and even tentative arrangements with Spanish merchants who bring goods from newly explored Atlantic islands. Yet success has brought challenges as well as rewards. The higher he climbs, the more precarious his position becomes. Rival merchants watch for any misstep, political alliances shift unpredictably, and the Crown's increasing demands for loans and voluntary contributions drain resources needed for trade. A soft knock heralds Margaret's arrival. At 46, she remains a handsome woman, though silver now threads through her dark hair. Her clothing reflects their elevated status, a kirtle of fine Flemish wool, with actual silk embroidery at the collar, a gold brooch at her throat, and rings on 3 fingers. "The final fitting for Catherine's wedding dress is complete," she announces. "The Florentine silk drapes beautifully." Edmund nods approvingly. "And the guest list?" 2 aldermen confirmed this morning, along with the sheriffs and their wives. The mayor sends regrets. Affairs of state require his presence elsewhere. "Probably the king demanding more money," Edmund mutters. "These French wars drain London's coffers faster than we can fill them." Margaret closes the door and lowers her voice. "Speaking of money, I've been reviewing our accounts. The loan to Lord Hastings remains unpaid, and his steward avoids our collectors." This represents another aspect of the gardeners' changed circumstances. As their wealth has grown, they've begun extending credit to minor nobility, a risky but potentially lucrative expansion beyond traditional merchant activities. The aristocracy's perpetual need for cash provides opportunities for profit, but collecting debts from powerful nobles presents unique challenges. I'll speak to his lordship directly at the Guildhall feast next week, Edmund decides. He can hardly avoid me there without causing gossip. Margaret nods, satisfied. After 26 years of marriage, they function as a seamless partnership, her practical management complementing his ambitious vision. How is Thomas progressing? She asks, changing the subject. Well enough. I've offered him the Bristol position. Margaret raises an eyebrow. A substantial opportunity. Do you think he's ready? He's more ready than I was at his age, Edmund admits. The boy has a natural gift for figures and a trader's instinct for value. Not a boy anymore, Margaret corrects gently. And speaking of which, I've noticed his interest in Joanna Fleming. Edmund looks up sharply. William's sister? The weaver's daughter? The same. She's a sensible girl, educated from a respectable guild family. It would be a suitable match for a young master starting his career. Edmund considers this. Personal happiness rarely drives marriage arrangements in their world, but compatibility matters for business partnerships, which is what merchant marriages essentially are. A weaver's daughter would bring useful connections to the cloth trade, potentially expanding Thomas's commercial reach. If he accepts the Bristol position, I could offer a marriage settlement as additional incentive, Edmund muses. Perhaps the lease on that small house near the river? Margaret smiles approvingly. That would be generous indeed. The boy has served you well. We've served each other well, Edmund corrects. His sharp mind has helped build our success these past 10 years. A bell sounds from the church tower nearby, marking the hour. Margaret rises. I must check on the household preparations. Henry returns from Oxford tomorrow, and his room needs readying. Their son, now 14, studies at Oxford University, an education once reserved for future clergymen, but increasingly sought by merchants' sons. Henry shows little interest in trade, preferring books and scholarly pursuits. Edmund has reluctantly accepted that his son may seek a career in law or the church rather than continuing the family business. Another reason Thomas's development has become so important. After Margaret departs, Edmund returns to the window, gazing out at the busy street below. Milk Street lies in the heart of London's commercial district, a location that proclaims the gardener's status as clearly as Edmund's guild chain or Margaret's silk-trimmed dresses. Outside, a cart passes laden with barrels, probably wine from Gascony, headed for a merchant's cellar. Two well-dressed guild members walk in conversation, likely discussing business or city politics. A group of apprentices hurries by on errands, distinguishable by their simpler clothing and deferential manner when passing their betters. This is Edmund's world, the urban ecosystem created and sustained by the guild system, a world where talent and cunning can overcome birth, where collective organisation provides security against life's uncertainties, where a farm boy like Thomas can potentially rise to master status through ability and patronage. The contrast with Edmund's own difficult early years remains sharp in his memory. He recalls his first months as an apprentice, sleeping on a straw pallet, performing menial tasks, learning the business from the bottom up. Now his own apprentices enjoy better conditions than he ever did. A calculated investment in their development rather than sentimentality. Well-treated apprentices become loyal journeymen who in turn become reliable business partners as masters. Not all survived the journey, of course. Edmund's thoughts turned to Matthew, the apprentice whose lung fever cast a shadow over that crucial guild feast a decade ago. Against all expectations, the boy survived his illness, though permanently weakened. Unable to continue as an apprentice, he might have faced destitution if not for the guild's support system. Instead, Edmund secured him a position as a clerk in the Grocers' Guild Hall, a role that required literacy but limited physical exertion. This, too, exemplifies the guild's function, providing alternatives when the primary path fails. Matthew now manages membership records for the very organisation that saved him from poverty, his skilled penmanship compensating for his frail constitution. A knock interrupts Edmund's reflections. This time it's Richard, his clerk, another innovation of the Gardner household's expansion. Once, Edmund kept all records himself. Now the volume of business requires dedicated assistance. "Master Gardner, Alderman Fraser is here to see you," Richard announces. Edmund straightens his tunic. John Fraser, now in his 70s but still influential in city politics, has been a key ally throughout Edmund's rise. Their relationship, begun with that pepper negotiation a decade ago, has proven mutually beneficial through changing circumstances. "Send him in and bring wine," Edmund instructs. Fraser enters with the deliberate pace of age, his rich clothing and gold chain of office marking his status as clearly as any herald's announcement. The two men exchange formal greetings before settling in the comfortable chairs by the small fireplace. "I won't waste time on pleasantries, Gardner," Fraser says after the wine is poured and they're alone. "The King's Council has requested another loan from the city, £20,000, to be raised from the guilds according to their wealth and membership." Edmund sighs. Royal demands for money have increased steadily as the French wars drain the treasury. "And the grocer's portion?" "3,000, Fraser says bluntly, second only to the mercers. It's a substantial sum, reflecting the Grocers' Guild's prosperity, but threatening to strain even their considerable resources. This is the downside of success. Greater visibility means greater demands from the Crown. The Council meets tomorrow to apportion each member's contribution, Fraser continues. As master of the company, you'll be expected to show leadership with your own share. Edmund nods, mentally calculating. His personal contribution might need to reach £100, a significant amount, but not ruinous given his current wealth. More importantly, his visible generosity will strengthen his position for the next goal, election as Alderman of Cordwainer Ward, a stepping stone to potentially becoming sheriff or even mayor. "I'll have a draft ready for the council's review," Edmund assures Fraser. "The grocers have always supported the Crown's legitimate needs." Fraser's thin smile acknowledges the careful phrasing. Merchants consider most royal financial demands illegitimate tax grabs rather than necessities. But open resistance would be politically dangerous. "There's another matter," Fraser says, lowering his voice. "Your daughter's marriage to young Whittington, a beneficial connection." Edmund inclines his head, accepting the compliment. "The families have compatible interests." "Indeed. And speaking of family interests, I understand your son shows academic promise." "Henry has a scholar's mind," Edmund acknowledges. "Oxford suits him well." Fraser nods thoughtfully. The Bishop of London mentioned needing a capable secretary with commercial knowledge, someone who understands both church administration and financial management. When the boy completes his studies, such a position might be arranged. This is how advancement works in their world, a network of favours and opportunities circulating among the guild elite. Fraser's connection to the bishop could secure Henry a prestigious position combining his scholarly interests with practical application. In return, Edmund's influence in the Grocers Guild will help Fraser's nephew receive preferential spice allocations for his growing export business. Most kind, Edmund says. I'll discuss it with the boy when he returns. Their conversation continues, touching on city politics, trade regulations, and the upcoming guild elections. Throughout, the subtext remains clear. Mutual support within the guild brotherhood ensures collective prosperity and individual advancement. After Fraser departs, Edmund sends for Thomas again. The young man's future has crystallized in Edmund's mind during the conversation with Fraser, another piece in the complex puzzle of Gardner family interests. "Have you considered my offer?" Edmund asks when Thomas appears. "I have, Master," Thomas replies. "It's a tremendous opportunity, but—" He hesitates. "Speak freely," Edmund encourages. "Bristol is far from London, far from certain connections I value." Edmund smiles slightly. "Joanna Fleming, perhaps?" Thomas blushes visibly. "How did you—" "Little happens in guild circles without my knowledge," Edmund says. "Her father is a respected weaver, her brother my former apprentice. The connection would be advantageous." Thomas looks startled by this business-like assessment of his personal feelings. "If you accept the Bristol position," Edmund continues, "I would provide a marriage settlement. The small house on Thames Street, perhaps, where the young couple could establish themselves while you build the Western trade." Understanding dawns on Thomas's face. This isn't just a business opportunity, but a complete life transition, from apprentice to master, from single man to husband, from subordinate to partner. The wedding could take place after Catherine's, Edmund adds. "While the arrangements are in place and before you leave for Bristol." Thomas swallows hard. "Master Gardner, I don't know how to thank you." "Success is thanks enough," Edmund says simply. "The Gardner trading network needs reliable hands in key locations. You've proven your worth these 10 years. Now you'll prove it again with greater responsibility." This, too, exemplifies the guild system's genius, the creation of interlocking interests across generations. Edmund invests in Thomas's future, expecting returns in loyalty and competent management. Thomas gains opportunities far beyond his birth circumstances, accepting obligations to his patron in return. Neither sees this arrangement as exploitation. Both recognize its mutual benefit. Later that evening, Edmund and Margaret sit in their private chamber, reviewing the day's developments. Their relationship has evolved over the decades into something richer than mere marriage. They're partners in the complex enterprise of family advancement through the guild system. "Thomas seemed overwhelmed by your offer," Margaret observes. "As well he might be," Edmund replies. "Few journeymen receive such opportunities without family connections." "He's earned it," Margaret says. "And speaking of family connections, I've had a letter from my cousin in York. Her son shows promise and they seek an apprenticeship for him." Edmund considers this. "Another apprentice? Thomas leaves for Bristol soon, but we still have 3 in the household." "Blood connections matter," Margaret reminds him. "My cousin's husband trades in northern wool. Such connections could prove valuable." This is another aspect of the merchant class strategy, the creation of business networks reinforced by family ties. A nephew apprenticed to Edmund might eventually facilitate wool shipments to London or spice distribution to York, strengthening both families' prosperity. "I'll consider it," Edmund agrees. After Catherine's wedding and Thomas's departure, they sit in comfortable silence for a moment, each contemplating the family's trajectory, from Edmund's humble beginnings as an apprentice himself to their current position, substantial wealth, guild leadership, connections extending into city government, and even the church hierarchy through Henry's potential appointment. "Did you ever imagine this?" Margaret asks, softly, gesturing to their surroundings. The spacious chamber with its tapestried walls, the silver candlesticks, the glass window that represents extraordinary luxury. "Not specifically," Edmund admits, "but I always knew the guild offered a path upward for those willing to work and plan carefully." "And sacrifice," Margaret adds, thinking of the long hours, the risks taken, the careful management of every aspect of their lives to maximize advancement. "A worthwhile exchange," Edmund says firmly. "Consider the alternative, life in the countryside at the mercy of weather and lord's whims. Or worse, an urban labourer with no guild protection, living hand to mouth." This awareness of their privileged middle position between the desperate poverty of peasants or unskilled workers and the inherited wealth of nobility shapes their entire worldview. The guild system has created a unique space where talent can triumph over birth, where collective organisation provides security, where urban merchants can achieve wealth and influence without title or land. "Catherine's children will never know anything but comfort," Margaret muses. "Born to established guild families, educated from birth, connections in both trade and government. If they're wise, they'll remember how precarious even established positions can be," Edmund cautions. "The guild protects those who serve its interests and contribute to its strength. Complacency leads to downfall." This lesson, that guild membership provides security but demands continuous effort, is one Edmund has impressed upon his children and apprentices alike. The system rewards ambition channeled through collective structures, individual advancement achieved within community frameworks. As they prepare for sleep, Edmund's thoughts turn to the future beyond his own lifespan. Thomas in Bristol establishing a western branch of the gardener trade network, Henry potentially in the bishop's service, extending family influence into church affairs, Catherine married into the Whittington family, connecting the Gardners to one of London's most prestigious merchant dynasties. From a single apprenticeship, Edmund has built a multi-generational enterprise embedded within the guild framework. The modest security he sought as a young man has expanded into a family legacy that could potentially last centuries, as long as each generation remembers the fundamental bargain at the heart of guild membership: prosperity in exchange for contribution, advancement through service to the collective. Outside their window, London settles into night. The watch calls the hours. Guild watchmen patrol warehouse districts. Apprentices sleep in attic chambers dreaming of mastership. Journeymen calculate their progress toward opening shops, and masters like Edmund plan expansions of trade networks that span continents. This is the world created by medieval England's urban middle class, a revolutionary space where birth need not entirely determine destiny, where collective organisation provides individual opportunity, where the skilled and cunning can rise to remarkable heights without noble title or vast landed estates. As you drift towards sleep in your comfortable modern bed, so different from the straw pallets and wooden frames of medieval London, remember that the guild system represented something extraordinary in human history: the creation of a middle path between feudal servitude and aristocratic privilege, a space where ordinary people could build lives of security and even occasional splendour through skill, calculation, and the power of working together. In the specialised expertise of the guild craftsman, the careful accounts of the merchant's wife, the strategic marriages of guild families, and the complex web of obligations between masters and apprentices, we see the early foundations of our modern world, where your own ability to sleep securely tonight owes more than you might imagine to those medieval innovators who first discovered the power of collective organisation to transform individual lives.